Welcome to the Infinite Evolution Podcast, where you'll receive keys and codes to help you unlock your next level of joy, radiance, health, wealth, intuition, embodiment, and soul purpose. This is a space for lightworkers, healers, spiritual entrepreneurs, and anyone who wants to share their soul gifts with the world. We'll be exploring personal, spiritual, and professional growth and ascension through both the esoteric and magical and the tangible and practical. I'm Casey Aileen Knight, coach, mentor, as well as divine channel and soul gift activator. I founded the Luminous Evolution brand to help you elevate your business and beingness and light up the world. So glad you're here. Let's dive in. Hello, beautiful ones. Welcome back to another conversation with the incredible Samantha Horton, or Sam. I had a conversation with her on her podcast, and I was absolutely inspired to have her on the Infinite Evolution podcast so we could continue the conversation about creativity. And I am so glad that she said yes to this because our hour together on hers was just not enough. But if you haven't listened to Sam's podcast, let me just tell you about her. She is an artist, a creative mentor, a life coach, and a spiritual guide. So there were a series of life challenges, from divorce and burnout to feelings of inner disconnection and emptiness, that were catalysts for this spiritual creative journey that led her out of the dark and transformed the way she cares for herself and shows up in the world. And this journey is what inspires Sam to support other women to turn their pain into power and evolve into the most beautiful, authentic, best versions of themselves using transformative, spiritual, and creative tools to remember who they really are at their core so they can meaningfully nurture themselves and authentically express their inner truth and experience personal expansion. So this is my jam and my vibe as well. I love weaving together creative expression and art into the evolutionary journey. So Sam, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks, Casey. I'm really excited to chat with you.
Yeah, me too. And it is always something that gets put on the back burner, I find, unless you are specifically talking to artists and creatives who have, of course, understood the value of creativity and all of that for their journey, for their personal power. But I know that you also know that people who aren't in that world seem to value creativity less than almost anything else. So I'd love to talk about how important it is on the evolutionary journey and go into some of the things that people can do today to tap back into that and why. I think we'll also get into like some of the sociocultural explanations for why it's undervalued, and also, of course, just see where else the conversation takes us. So
Great.
I would absolutely adore hearing what kind of creativity you bring in with your clients. Are you talking art that is like visual art, movement arts, performing arts? What could people expect?
Sure. I mainly use creative writing. So I think, that inner inquiry is really important, and asking yourself these really deep and profound questions can really help open you up. And it's not just journaling. I think you can go a bit deeper than that and, play around with, things like letter writing exercises to different versions of yourself, or trying to rewrite narratives if things haven't necessarily worked out the way that you had hoped for, and really just going on a journey with that. And then obviously the highlight of the creative tools that I use really is around art making. So I use art making not to teach people how to become an artist. That's not That's not the point. The point is leaning into the process. And I use art making because it's really accessible. You don't need any prior experience. Everybody, when they were a kid in kindergarten, was experimenting with art materials. And there is huge power in taking a blank page and doing this inquiry work and using art materials to express that inner truth onto a blank page. It's very powerful. And I think a lot of people have a big aha moment around this, right? Because we're taught that the output of things is the most important bit, but you couldn't be further from the truth when it comes to creativity.
It's about the journey and the discovery for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love this, especially because we have complementary modalities or forms of art that we have experience supporting people on transformational journeys with. Because my background is more movement arts,
Hmm.
performing arts, hula hooping, even circus
Sure,
arts. And then also that self-inquiry a little bit through journaling, but actually through having people channel and bring through very similar kinds of inquiry and questions. So
sure.
I love, love, love how many different ways there are to
Mm,
tap into this. But how often do you come up against people just saying, "Oh, I'm not an artist. I can't
mm.
draw. I can't."
Yeah, I think it's really common. So I think there's kind of two types of people. So there's the person who hasn't touched that kind of, art supplies or whatever since they were, in kindergarten, and very young as a child. And they're the people that think I'm not creative, I don't have a creative bone in my body, this type of thing, which is not true. It's just that they haven't given themselves the permission to experiment with it, as an adult. And then the second type of person is somebody who knows that they're creative, but kind of has all the supplies hanging about in the cupboard and they're collecting dust and they don't come out very often at all because the creative side of them is not, they're not prioritizing it and they're not valuing it. So they're the sort of two types, I would say.
I definitely would fall into that category of the second,
Yeah.
where sometimes it's not that I don't value it, it's that
Mm,
sometimes I forget to make time for it.
sure. Sure. Yeah.
So
I mean, that's the
having a
thing, is it?
guide,
Sorry.
oh, sorry, I was just gonna say, so having a guide, having someone make me do it is the
Yeah.
way that I get into it.
Yeah, 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 sure. It helps. Yeah. I mean, we struggle to give ourselves permission for a lot of things, right? Life's busy and there's always something else that we should be doing. So, you know, it's our job, I guess, to kind of rewrite that for ourselves and to give us more permission to do the things that really bring out that joy, and, help us to really thrive and connect within.
Absolutely. And I think creating the space consciously
Mm,
is easier with a guide, but how often would you say you create a space for yourself to be creative like this in any way, really, on
yeah.
the regular? What's your practice like?
It's kind of my mission, like my mission is to have a really creative life. Yes, I love to paint. That's kind of my number one creative outlet, I suppose. But there are elements of that as I've gone on that journey that kind of feel a bit more like work because once you start selling your art, you're kind of tied into this thing where you have to worry about the outcome a little bit more than you would if you were just playing. Um, but really, what I mean by a creative life is, choosing the scenic route, when it feels good to you. And that's the literal scenic route, but also, the way that you kind of show up in your life and the way that you, care for your home even. I really believe in creating a home sanctuary that's kind of got all this creative energy pumped into it so that you've got this kind of really awesome foundation to serve all of the areas of your life from. And that can look like just decorating it with your personality. It can look like, infusing kind of like more practical elements with how you want to use the space and making sure it's set up to really hold you and support you. Things like how you feed your family, making things from scratch when you can, because obviously there's more love poured into your food that way. So, yeah, that's what I kind of mean by creative living.
I love that because my mind has gone to sitting and making art. And you
Yeah,
brought that into every facet of your life,
yeah,
which is incredible.
yeah. So the art thing for me is very important, and I think everyone probably has a creative, um, a really juicy creative thing that they love to pour their soul into. But creativity is so much more than that. It's a way of living and a way of experiencing life. Where you're really honoring kind of your essence and you're pouring your essence into every area of your life, really.
Mm. Absolutely. We are creator beings in
Hmm.
my philosophy of life. We came
Hmm.
here as these fractals of the infinite that wanted to experiment with creating in these dense physical bodies. So
Yeah.
we put these limitations on ourselves
Mm.
to explore what it's like to create with them.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that so much. And I know this stuff. And I still sometimes find myself not prioritizing it, not
Sure.
remembering how important it is. So,
Mm.
how do you encourage your clients to make this a
Hmm.
priority?
I think the really key thing in all of this is actually a shift in perspective. So I think that we have been conditioned from a very young age to prioritize this kind of these metrics of external validation, achievement, success. We were very fixed on the outcome of things and how much we're producing. We're tied into this kind of efficiency and productivity and checking off the list kind of mentality, which is, a very masculine energy. And so the shift in perspective is then to understand that there is another side to us, which is equally important. And that's the feminine creative energy, which is very much about receiving, allowing, trusting. It's more, it's gentle and sort of strategic in its approach. And so I think once we understand that, we need both of these elements, these energetic elements in our life to really thrive and to kind of really feel whole, then it kind of is a game changer, right? Because you start to understand, this is why I'm feeling so disconnected from myself because I'm out of balance.
Mm. Absolutely. It's so important to bring the masculine and the feminine into
Yeah.
that sacred union because we do need both. But
Yeah.
as you're speaking, I also am hearing like it's not just the masculine energy, but the entire capitalistic,
Yes.
patriarchal, of course, society that we
Yes.
live in that
Yes.
makes things only valuable when they have
Yes.
some kind of economic value.
Yes. It's so true. And we've all bought into it, like we are conditioned to believe that that is kind of, all we really should be worrying about. But there is so much more to us than just that side.
Absolutely. And even in a capitalistic society like ours, I mean, we do value the arts. Think about the movie
Mm,
industry, the music
hmm.
industry,
Hmm.
every graphic design makes our life better in every way. We love, beauty, although we could argue that it is fading from the world in favor of, minimalism and all of that stuff.
Sure.
But people don't put the value on art the same
Yeah.
way that they do, say, STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
where
Particularly in
do
the school
things go
system,
wrong there?
right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've
Mm,
seen funding cut across the globe to arts programs.
mm, yeah. Yeah. I think it's, yeah. I mean, I think art is still obviously part of our society, but I think there's also this mentality where you kind of either got it or you don't. Like this kind of this talent kind of mindset where, you're either really talented and you're gifted from birth or you're not at all, right? Where the truth is that everybody has to work for it. And if you are like drawn to something creatively, if you're drawn to, experiment with your creativity in any way, you're going to go on a journey with it and you're going to be a beginner and you're going to suck at the beginning and then you're going to slowly grow because the more you do something, the better you get at it. It's just kind of like, one of the laws that, govern us. So, yeah, I think that mindset of you've either got it or you don't, is part of the problem.
Absolutely. And that begins so early on in
Mm,
elementary school. I used to teach performing arts, dance, gymnastics, things like that. And by about grade 4, people
yeah.
started categorizing themselves as they were either good at that stuff or
Hmm.
not. And
Yes.
you hit it right on the money, where, of course, we can have natural inclination, talent, and proclivity, but to
Yeah.
get better at anything, you need to suck at it and
Yeah.
practice and fail and screw up and keep going and learn from the
Yeah.
mistakes more than anybody who hasn't really tried would even conceive of, honestly.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah, absolutely. I think you can do anything, right? If you pour energy into something, you're going to have an experience with it, and you're naturally going to grow with it. And through and growth, kind of means expansion, and it means, developing skills and all these sorts of things. So yeah, anything's possible.
I used to see this a lot when I was a hula hoop teacher, of all things.
Hmm.
I was really good at hula hooping and I had natural talent and a dance background and a gymnastics background, but I didn't learn until I was 28. So I knew that there was a lot of um, mindset that came into this. But I would have students come up and say, I want to learn how to hula hoop just like you. And I was like, amazing, I can teach you. And then it's going to take a couple thousand hours, 1,000 hours of practice.
Yeah.
And their faces would fall, crestfallen. They'd look at me and say, I don't want to have to practice for thousands of hours. And I'm like, okay, well, you're never going to hoop like me then.
Yeah, that's it. But this is where, those 1,000 hours or a couple of thousand hours, that's where the juicy stuff is. That's the process, right? That's where you learn, all the things, not just about hula hooping in this example, but about yourself, right? This is where the good stuff is.
Exactly. And I mean, you can learn so much when you are mentored and all of that, but we do need to put in the work to master anything. And they say 10,000 hours is where you start to really gain mastery. And I
Yeah.
feel like there is this reluctance in our day and age. Maybe it's the instant gratification society that we live in. People are reluctant to put in work to things that take time.
Mm. Yeah, but I think that's, probably an attraction to the shiny object at the end, rather than the journey. And I think if you're, truly aligned with something, if it's really for you, if it's something that's really speaking to you at soul level, then you want to go on that journey because, yeah, I mean, it's the journey, I think, that draws you in, not necessarily the shiny object at the end. I know that's certainly true for me with painting. Um, you think, oh, a painter sits down to create a beautiful painting, but the thing that keeps me showing up for it is actually the process of doing it and all the juicy stuff that I get to experience when I'm doing it.
I relate to that so much because of the movement arts, and even when I'm sharing something like light language, it's the experience and the feeling of being in the flow state that I
Yeah.
value the most rather than the
Yeah.
finished product.
Yeah. And that flow state you're talking about, that's a connection to something much bigger than us, right? It's a soul connection, a spiritual connection. That's what I believe anyway. I think it takes you to a place that's like a much higher part of yourself.
Absolutely. It's this unified body, heart, mind, soul, movement, energy, and
Yeah.
it's my favorite state in the world because I find that in that flow state, you are healing. You're already healed. You're whole. Your nervous
Yeah.
system is, in this state of homeostasis, and your body can do what it's supposed to do. And it's just so profoundly beautiful.
Yeah. I actually think there's three stages to it I can share if you like.
Oh, yes, please.
So I think the first stage, this is really around any creative sort of activity, I guess, or any creative yeah, experience. So the first stage is kind of quieting the noise. So getting so still that you can really hear yourself. And this is like, distracting your body or your hands or whatever. Your busy mind is busy doing these things, right, with your hands or your body um, so that you can get still enough to really hear yourself, right? Because that busy mind often gets in the way. I know some people struggle with meditation for that very reason, because the busy brain won't go away. So that's the first layer. Um, the second layer is really about going a bit deeper. So allowing your subconscious and your intuition to really start to bubble up to the surface while you're creating. And what will happen is you'll start to your soul will kind of show you what you need to process or what you need to work through. And it's kind of, it could be your feelings, your emotions, your experiences, your beliefs, anything. And there's real magic in just sitting with, whatever comes up for you and sitting with it enough so that you can let anything go that's not serving you and then welcome in kind of the new uplifting energy. And then the third stage is what we were just talking about, which is what I call creative flow, which is really that spiritual connection where you've just gone another layer deeper again and you're able to really, get in tune with something much bigger than you. So very powerful.
Mm, I love that. There is an element when we're doing both movement arts or a physical art process, more so than, say, creative writing, but also there, where there's also this element of needing to learn the skills and master the skills with the conscious mind and bring it into the
Hmm.
muscle memory so
Hmm.
that you can even find that flow state, that creative flow state. And I
Yeah,
think
well,
that, go ahead.
so I was just going to say it becomes easier, right? So the more you train your muscle and your mind and everything to do the task at hand, it becomes easier to do the task and you're kind of up leveling with it all the time.
Exactly. And I find though it's that point at phase two where you're in the process of learning the skills that you bump up against the mind level, the beliefs, the
Right.
emotions, the feelings of I can't and who am I to do this and the
Yeah.
frustration and all of that. And you become a different person when you work through all of that, who can access that creative
Mm.
state.
Yeah, that's so true. That's beautiful. Yeah. I think there's kind of two sides to it. So I think that's what you're explaining there, where you're the literal kind of barrier that you find in your creative activity. The literal barrier kind of is a mirror for life, right? So I think that's
Mhm.
what you're explaining there. And then I think there's a more kind of surreal element to it where you suddenly start thinking about an experience you had and you're like, where did that come from? Like it was 2 years ago. I thought I dealt with that. And you start to feel all this stuff and all of a sudden, you've kind of let it go or you've found the answer finally or the meaning or something that's really of value to you in your life to move forward.
Like that processing of
Yeah,
stuck and stagnant energies, thoughts, and emotions
that's it.
through the artistic process.
That's it. Yeah, and it's like your soul speaking to you in a way, it's very random. And I think the more you show up for creativity, the more likely that is to happen. Like it's kind of like a reward for showing up, I think.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily something that you'd experience on day one.
I think so. Do you think the people that are coming to you to work with you are aware of how deep they'll be going, or does it wind up surprising them in the process?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an eye opener, but I think it does take time to get that level of depth. And I think that from a client point of view, I think it's actually probably more at a subconscious level that all this energetic kind of shifting is happening. And I think it's hard to understand it, when you're kind of beginning on your journey, because I'm supporting women, to move through challenges and, sort of inner conflict or life moments. So that's their focus point. And I think that it's kind of like um, you know, um, there's a transformation or a shift in perspective that happens as part of the process, but pinpointing it on, spending time creating is not necessarily, obvious. I think that's a journey that you go on for yourself, and it develops over time. Does that make sense?
It does. And I was curious when people are coming into your world if they know how deep they're going to go because I think so many people are unaware.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I think that, people are coming into my world because they've resonated with either my own journey or, the way that I work. So they're either attracted to the whole blending. I call it a unique medicine for the soul. So they're attracted because it's this kind of unique blending of spiritual and creative tools, or they're resonating with my story. And, my story is really, embodied in everything that I do with clients. So it's one or the other. And I think that, like with any journey of expansion and evolution, and personal growth, you're going to, have a very unique experience to you. And it's only in reflection that we're able to see how the tools helped us, because the experience is kind of bigger than us. The transformation's bigger than us and bigger than our mental mind. Because if we were able to solve our problems with our mind, we would have done it already, right?
Absolutely. And I feel that the arc for me of becoming a professional hula hooper changed me and healed me in ways that I could never have imagined or even put into an intention before I went on that journey.
Absolutely. That's it. So I think, you've got to have an open heart and an open mind, but it's only it. I mean, I can share with you. So when I was navigating kind of my divorce journey, so obviously, it was a bit of a long journey actually. And, I hope it doesn't take anyone else as long as it took me. But the thing that really helped me through that whole, working out how to find my power and, getting the courage up to separate, and ultimately get divorced from my husband. Um, the thing that really helped me was my creative practice. And at the time, I didn't really, know what was happening. I just knew that I wanted to paint, and I wanted, I was painting these like really feminine power portraits. And now I'm looking back on it, years later, it's so obvious that this was part of my empowerment and part of my healing journey, painting these beautiful, empowered women. But at the time, I was just painting them because I wanted to paint them, not because I thought they were going to help me. Does that make sense? So it's only in reflection that you're able to really see how it helped you.
Absolutely. And I think because a lot of these journeys are soul led when we're not maybe walking through a process with the facilitator, but on our own journey, that's
Yeah.
exactly how it has to go. Though
Yeah.
when you are facilitating somebody through your own process, there might be like a collapsing of that journey with a little bit more of the
Yes.
intentional healing.
Yeah, like a condensing, all the juicy bits you've kind of packaged up for people so that they can speed up their experience. And yeah, I mean, it took me 10 years, really to move through that, I think. So let's hope it doesn't take that long with a client.
Well, no, because you went through it to be the embodiment of it and hold the codes and keys and knowledge and experience inside of yourself to offer it up to people to be able to shorten their journeys for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, absolutely.
And at the same time, I mean, we as facilitators are just a small part of somebody's journey as well. And their journey is going to be 10 years or a lifetime also. same
Yeah,
time.
that's it. That's it. And I think we're just looking for those small shifts in perspective that really amount to, expansion and transformation. It's not like one big aha, I don't think. I think it's a series of micro, um, ahas, for want of a better a word. It's a little journey that you take yourself on, and when you reflect back on it, you realize actually, like I started off, in such a different place, and I'm actually changed and a different person, months or years later.
And that hindsight is so incredible to bring us this energy of, uh, I guess it's this feeling like that we actually can indeed do hard things and go through these transformations. Whereas at the
Mhm.
moment in time, just like a little pocket of time, we can feel so stuck.
Yeah, that's it. And I think that this is the thing as well. I think you know, on my own journey, moving through some really big challenges. I talked about divorce, but there have been other things too. I've shifted my career dramatically. I've been involved in highly toxic situations as well that just felt impossible. And the way that you navigate these things is just one small step at a time. And that's the only way that you can get through it. There's no dramatic leap necessary. It's just a series of tiny steps that really um, help you to evolve, I think, as a human being.
Mm. Exactly. Taking it each tiny step at a time and
Mm.
bringing in the tools that are going to support in every way, like bringing in the creativity and the
Yeah,
art to really process in the moment.
that's it. I mean, the tools are there to really facilitate those shifts, those changes within you. That's what they're there for. They're there to help you look at your problems in a different way, and help you look at the way you want to live your life in a different way. If it's kind of this thing where, like, if you don't have an intention, a vision for how you want to feel in your life, at least as a bare minimum, even if you don't know what you want it to look like, if you don't have that, then you're just going to continue to stay stuck, right? You're going to keep repeating the same patterns. So all of these tools are really just either to, support you and nurture you on your journey, or to help you create that more empowered vision and version of yourself that you're moving towards, your North Star, as you put it. So yeah, so I think that's the beauty of the journey.
Absolutely, turning our pain and our challenges and alchemizing them into that that learning, that growth, and even purpose. And sometimes if you go all the way into profit as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
not
that's it.
everybody's going to go all the way to turning their pain into a profitable business. But as a soul-led entrepreneur,
Yeah,
that is the journey.
yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, I think my life was very out of whack. For many, many years, I struggled to really trust my inner knowing. I knew certain things were not for me, and yet I continued to allow them to be part of my life. And that's what I hope to support other women with, is to learn how to trust that inner knowing to the point where you can really hold your shape, and honor your deep truth. And it's a really beautiful place to be when you know that you're acknowledging that inner knowing, and you're moving in directions that really support that inner knowing, and that really align your life with your core values and who you really are.
Exactly. And I think at the core of it, anytime I've ever had a conversation with a soul-led entrepreneur or a heart-centered entrepreneur who is in service, that's exactly the mission, to help
Mm,
people through whatever process they're going through, to get rid of the stuff that is binding us to the old stories and the old programs and the old ways of being that might not be aligned with who we truly are, and then helping people own the truth, that divine truth of their
Mm.
soul, and let them express it.
That's it. Yeah. And part of that is actually taking a lot of leaps of faith, right? A lot of stepping into the unknown and saying goodbye to things that just aren't part of your future vision. And it's, it's work.
Absolutely. And it is not easy work, but
No.
the process of art, making art, creating art, whether it's music, songwriting, journaling, if it's physical art, if it's movement art, it literally moves the energy through the body instead of it being stuck in us as stored energy. So
Yeah,
it makes it
absolutely.
easier to live, I think, after you've moved that.
Yeah. And I think it's, part of that, part of the creative piece of that is finding ways to express yourself and your inner truth without needing to use the logic and the mental space and, words even. Um, because, if you can express yourself in ways that are, um, I guess, even more basic, then it becomes part of your spiritual practice, right? When you can really express your truth like that, without these traditional methods of logic and words. It's very powerful.
It's so powerful because the mind is an incredible tool, but it also can be a hindrance to all
Yeah.
of the rest of those things.
Yeah. It needs to be kept in check, right? It needs to be kept in balance. It's more to us than just our minds.
Absolutely. We have the entirety of our being, and I think the mind has been very glorified as we've been talking about that
Yeah.
capitalistic, patriarchal, STEM-centered society,
Yeah.
because it's been glorified, honestly, the rational, the reasonable, as
Yeah.
opposed to the intuitive and
Yes.
creative.
Absolutely. And both, we need both to thrive, I believe. So, yeah, the more we can understand that for ourselves and look at our lives and think about how we are showing up, and what energy we're showing up. Um, yeah, the better we can get to kind of experiencing, optimal well-being, I think.
Exactly. It's that coming back into unity, whereas we've been playing in this energy of separation for so long. Even the
Yeah.
concept that I think is not as popular now, but do you remember there was a lot of talk like a few decades ago about you're either right-brained or you're left-brained.
Oh
You're
yeah.
either logical and rational or you are a woo-woo flighty dreamer, right? There was always
Yeah.
a little bit of derision to the one side. And you don't hear that conversation as much because I believe we are coming back into this understanding of wholeness as
Yeah.
slowly. So I'm so
Yeah.
grateful you're a part of that movement to bring the feminine, the intuitive, the creative back into
Mm.
the um the zeitgeist really for people on their
Yeah.
healing journey.
It's a very powerful thing. When you can welcome more of that energy into your life, it's very powerful. And it actually complements, this logical, um, you know, action taking side of you, because otherwise we're just always using our minds to solve our problems and we're sitting in this logic space. But if we can draw on the feminine wisdom and we can draw on, our creativity, and then take that more masculine action, it's a great, they complement each other. And that's how they're supposed to work, right?
Yes, exactly. And this is what was missing was we do need both. And the greatest scientific minds always had both. And they talked about both the intuitive and even the mystical and the creative as well as
Yes.
the logical and rational. And same thing with Fortune 500 company CEOs. They often talk about using their intuition, using their creativity
Yeah.
because the mind alone in its analytical process just can't fully grasp the vastness of, making decisions that are too big for the mind's calculator, basically. We need the
Yeah,
brain's creative intuition to function properly in this world.
yeah. And I think, we will naturally be better at some things than others, and we'll have natural preferences for the ways that we show up in the world and the way that we want to live in the world. But, um, we can learn, we can learn to create more balance. We can learn things that we're not so good at, to create that balance, and it's kind of almost like looking at your life, in terms of your whole life, your mental and your emotional and your physical and your spiritual, and just making sure that all those boxes are being filled up in some way. Because if they're not, then you're kind of out of whack, and it certainly needs to be looked at.
Exactly. So where would you recommend someone begin?
I think the beginning is really to get curious, right? To write this permission slip to get curious about how you're living your life, and if there are some gaps, for example, the big gap is often creativity, right? If you do have that kind of gap where you're not really honoring your creativity, in any way, then it's really about getting curious about that, and um, you're starting to ask yourself, whether there's anything that you're particularly drawn to that you're kind of denying yourself, anything that's kind of whispering to you or nudging at you. That's what happened to me anyway. I had what I call a creative calling, and it just got louder and louder and wouldn't go away. So I think there are signs, we kind of know, we know what our souls, sort of leading us towards. But it's this denial, this kind of um, fixation on, we're too busy and we're prioritizing all the other things over nurturing what our soul really wants.
Mm, absolutely. And I actually know that you have a free guide that I think could help somebody get started with this process. Do you want to tell us about it?
Yeah, sure. So I have a free guide at the moment, and it's 7 spiritual and creative tools. And it's really designed to sort of help you if you're feeling stuck or you're not sure what to do next. And it takes you on a journey of, the areas of your life that maybe you can uh, inject a little bit more inquiry, a little bit more soul-led inquiry into. And yeah, so basically some deep questions to really sit there and ask yourself, and then some creative activities to kind of open up your heart space, help you get out of your head and into your heart.
Mm, I love that. And I love the subtitle you have on here that says Turning Personal Turmoil into Opportunities for Expansion and Transformation.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a bit of an intro, a bit of a taste for getting curious, really, right? So just what I said before, getting curious about, what might be missing for you and what you might need to start looking at in order to move forward with a little bit more ease and a little bit more integrity.
Mm. It sounds like an amazing resource when people are wanting to get started using creativity as a tool to process the mess and turn
Yeah.
it into more of that magic.
Yeah. And, it's an opportunity, like I said, to get out of that logical mind, and to really see what sits underneath the surface, and, let your creative self bring that out for you.
I love it. I'll make sure to put your link to your website and the free guide in the show notes so people can access them. Um, and also, I would love to link to your podcast if people are really resonating with your words. That's another incredible place to dive in deeper to living a soul-led creative life.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. My podcast is also on my website, and it's called Soul Led Creative Women.
Mm. It is amazing to connect with you today because I just love, love, love planting seeds for people to get into that, get back into the creative expression that they have perhaps left behind, or to go deeper into it because it's such an important part of our evolutionary journey. Is there anything else that you can share or leave as a little piece of wisdom for someone who's wanting to really start to prioritize creativity in their life?
I think I've probably already said it, but just, that process of giving yourself permission to get curious, and to, you know, one of my big tips is actually just to, raid your kids' art supplies. We've all got drawers full of them, right? Cupboards full of kids' art supplies. That's all you need, right? Just to have a little play with them and just see how they feel in your hands. And that's a great starting point, just to scribble on a page with some crayons or something and see what comes up for you.
Mm, I love that. And one of my favorite things about having a child has been to revisit some of these more visual arts that I haven't done as much of. And I will just share, if somebody is drawn also to movement arts, it's, not thinking you need to take a dance class or do something. Literally just put on a song and let your body move in the way that it wants to
Yeah,
process that energy. It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be
no.
a big deal. You don't have to spend any money, or you could go to the dollar store if you don't have a kid. In fact, get your
Yeah,
kids' art supplies at the dollar store
yeah,
too,
that's
because
it.
that's the best place, right?
That's it.
And
Yeah.
have some freaking fun with it. I think we get too caught up in making it good, right? Like thinking it's
Oh,
serious when it's the opposite.
yeah. And I think the thing that really opens people up is when they realize how simple it is to make that inner connection. Because what happens is when you play around like that, whether it's, dancing around the room, like you said, or with some basic art supplies, it feels really good, right? And that it alone is enough to make you curious to, maybe try some other things as well.
Mm, exactly. And once you get started, it's almost like turning on this flow that you'll get a little addicted to it, right? Because it feels so
Mm.
good. So it's just the process of getting started that's a big hurdle, I find.
Yeah. And ultimately you'll know, if some things make you feel more curious than others, they're the things that you should be pursuing. So um yeah, it's this curiosity, if you've got, an inkling to try something, then you should, because it could just open you up to a whole, new fun experience.
Absolutely. And I am so excited for more people to tap into this power. And I will confess, I have been doodling the entire time since we're an audio only podcast. And it felt so lovely to allow my hand to just process the energy of our conversation as it was in action. So
Mm.
just sharing that in case anybody else needs permission to just doodle.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I love that, Casey.
I'll send you a picture so you can see how creative it is. And now I'm like, okay, I need to go get a marker because my black pen is just not cutting it and I want to color it in. So that is my next adventure.
So good.
Oh, thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, Sam. If you have resonated with what Sam has been sharing, please check her out on her podcast, on her website, and get her free guide. Thank you again. And just to everyone, go have some creative time today. Don't wait, make it today, okay? And if you have to go to bed because it's bedtime, then make it first thing tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you've enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and share this out to people that need to hear it. Tag us on social media. You can find us at The Luminous Evolution on Instagram. And keep the conversation going by joining my free sacred community, Luminous Evolution, on Facebook, and get a taste of my favorite tools and techniques inside my free Frequency Upgrade Academy. You can also join me inside my membership, mastermind, certification programs, or private coaching to be deeply supported on your evolutionary journey. Make sure to check out the links in the show notes, and cheers to your infinite, luminous evolution.